What up? Welcome back to another Malazan Book of the Fallen video. This is episode 2 in our Gardens of the Moon series, and today we're going to be tackling some of that key background information and just kind of laying that stage for all of the events that play out, and just my take on how confusing it really is and how you should approach the book. So we're starting to get into the meat of Gardens of the Moon. Let's hit it. So where does the story get kicked off? In the prologue, we start in Malaz Isle, which is kind of where the whole thing started. But if you watch Daniel Green's video, and I'll try and link to that up there, you kind of get the message that you just are chucked into the deep end. And to a large extent, I agree with that, hence making this video. But I actually love the beginning, and I think if you have a little bit of background material and don't get bogged down in trying to remember every single person's name, etc., and all the different geographies that they're talking about, it's a lot of fun. So we kind of cut to Ganos Perrin, a young Ganos Perrin who's on top of Mock's Hold, which is just a kind of castle essentially on that Malaz island, and he's looking down over kind of a smoky ruin where a lot of battles are happening down below in the city of Malaz, which is the only city on Malaz Island, obviously. As he's kind of looking out over the city, we come to learn that there's been like a major power transition, which has just happened in the Malazan Empire. And so like all the kind of death and destruction that's happening down below as he's looking down is really a consequence of that power transition, where Lacine has just kind of taken the throne of the Malazan Empire. I think Ganos is something around 12 or 13 at this particular moment in time. And kind of as he's out there looking out, we see these soldiers approach. One's a commander, and then the other one obviously works for him. We come to find out much later on, and this is no spoiler, that commander was the legendary Whiskey Jack, who was already like a legend in Ganos Perrin's eyes by that time, and one of his kind of squad mates named Fiddler, who's like one of the sickest characters in the whole book. I won't call him a favorite, but Fiddler is definitely dope. And we basically come to learn that, not everybody is super happy about this power transition that's just happened. Apparently, Lacine / Surly used to be kind of like a peer almost to Whiskey Jack, and so they exchange some pretty choice words. We find out, obviously, that she's trying to banish the use of sorcery, and Whiskey Jack tells her that that's not going to work. He also gives Ganos some advice, like, dude, don't become a soldier, find something better to do with your life, like look at all the death and destruction down there. We kind of get to see Surly there and kind of get that introduction to her attitude, because she's kind of egotistical, she's very like detached seeming, and also get to see her with some of her claw, which again is this kind of elite unit that she used to be the head of, and you can't really pigeonhole them as just kind of assassins. They did definitely assassinate people, but they're kind of like spies too, and just very like covert style agents. A lot of them are actually mages too, and so you get to see her kind of, whoa, my dogs are going crazy. But you get to see her with all those claw, and kind of, it really does set that big kind of intimidating vibe for Surly / Lacine going forward. The other thing that we find out through Whiskey Jack, not directly, but just kind of via the conversations that he has with Surly and some of the advice he gives to Ganos Perrin, is that a lot of the old guard has either been taken down, taken out, or they've been kind of knocked down a few pegs, himself included. And actually at the end of that interaction, she kind of ships Whiskey Jack off again to kind of go out and do more like grunt / dirty work. So that's kind of where the prologue leaves off, and kind of you get to see that first introduction to the world through the eyes of this kind of young Ganos Perrin. So the kind of main book, the main chapters after the prologue take place about 7 years down the road. So Ganos is now basically about 20 years old-ish. He's a young officer in the Malazan army, and didn't kind of take Whiskey Jack's advice, obviously. And he's basically kind of down in Itko Khan in Kwantali, and he's there to basically witness or be there right after this major slaughter where like hundreds and hundreds of soldiers from the Malazan army have been killed. This is no spoiler. This happens like within the first like 10-15 pages of the book. Adjunct Lorne, right, who's the Empress's second in command, shows up, and he basically gets tasked with helping her to investigate and find out what's going on down in Itko Khan. Ultimately, they do all this stuff and go all over and chat and everything else and, learn about each other, but essentially it boils down to the fact that there's like a lot more than meets the eye. It wasn't just that hundreds and hundreds of people died. It seems like that might have been a diversionary tactic for some other shenanigans that are going on. And so ultimately she basically like adopts him and tells his captain, look, I'm taking this lieutenant. He's now part of my staff. And that's why I kind of introduced him as part of that Imperial command structure rather than as part of the army, because very early in the book, Lorne's like, I'm cherry picking this dude out. He's coming with me. He's mine now. And they basically go on to essentially try and figure out what happened and what it all means and how this is all related to the events that take place and to the Empire, etc. Throughout the remainder of the book. A big chunk of the rest of the book, at least from Ganos Perrin's perspective, is really trying to connect the dots on that initial slaughter and how it relates to kind of the war effort, right? Because again, the Malazan Empire is now on Genebacchus, trying to expand its empire and kind of subdue that continent and subjugate him and get him to accept Malazan rule, essentially. And so that's kind of like my interpretation of like how you approach the book. It's essentially like a mystery, right? There's all these different competing factions with different interests and motivations, etc. We have this one kind of central event that kicks everything off, being the slaughter down in Itko Khan, and just having something fishy about it, and Ganos Perrin's efforts to basically figure out what's up, what's going on. And so that's kind of how I think you read it, and I think that's why maybe it seems super confusing, just on top of the fact that you're learning about like the magic system and all the crazy names, right? They're not all named like Sarah and Tammy and Bob and John, etc. So that's just challenging in and of itself. But on top of that, it's kind of meant, I think, to be confusing, right? Because you're just diving straight into the heart of this giant mystery, and even to the players within the book, it's not clear what's happening to them either, because there's just so many different competing motivations and factions, 15 continents, countries, a lot of which has already been conquered by the Malazan Empire, so a lot of people are rising up in resistance. And then on top of that, you've got the kind of internal power struggle within the Malazan Empire, right, with Surly having recently deposed / assassinated, what have you, the former emperor, and that kind of creates all kinds of stuff too, because even within the army, within the Malazan Mage Corps, there's not a clear sense of like who's still loyal, who's pissed off, who's not happy about the way things went down. And so you really don't know like who's out for revenge, who's playing for the team, essentially. And I think that all kind of adds to the confusion. But I think that, that's not a knock against the book. I think it's kind of supposed to be confusing, because with mystery, you're kind of starting with big question marks, and then you're picking up little clues as you go along to try and piece together like what was that all about, and what does it mean for the overall empire, the plot of the book, etc. And to me, that's one of the really cool things about starting out like being being riding shotgun with Gano's parent, right? Because he wasn't part of the old guard. He was like 12 years old or something when Lacine assumed power. And so, you know, he doesn't know a lot of those allegiances or factions. And so you're kind of learning and figuring it out with Ganos as things go along. It's also really cool to just be riding shotgun with him because, you know, you're kind of seeing the world through his eyes. And again, a lot of these figures that we meet, be they the bridge burners or the Empress or, you know, the head of the claw or Animander Rake down the road, whoever, these are all people who, you know, you get the sense through Perrin's eyes that these are people of like major consequence, and it just kind of adds those layers of like suspense and just depth to the mystery as you're trying to unravel it. So, you know, at the end of the day, when we get started, all we really know is that there's this big Malazan empire that's basically set on expansion, right? And they've got their eyes set on this continent of Genabacus. We know that there's a lot of people who are basically putting themselves in the way of that because they're not happy about this kind of constant expansion of the empire. And that also the kind of empire itself has a lot of dissension in the ranks. And so that's where we kind of pick up with Gano's parent to begin to figure it all out. And again, if you kind of check out that video by Daniel Green, there's a lot going on, and you definitely feel like you're just chucked into the deep end. And so hopefully this kind of background helps to set the stage for just what's going on, what you really need to know, and what are some of the things that you can kind of just, you know, kind of push on with in hopes of kind of gleaning more insights into the mystery. This is essentially a big mystery book, even though it's a big fantasy epic. It's, you know, the epic plays out over the whole 10 books of the series, but I would say in large part, book number 1 is, you know, you can read it as you would approach a mystery. There's all these different players, who wants what and what's going on. So again, hopefully that helps to make Gardens of the Moon a little bit less confusing, a little bit less intimidating, but I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments below. What did I miss? What are some of those key things that you think these first-time readers need to have in mind to kind of make it a more enjoyable experience and to make it a little bit less intimidating / less confusing? Let's get some conversation going down there, because I guarantee there's a huge chunk that I missed, and would just love to kind of get your thoughts and spitball and bounce ideas back and forth. So next week, we'll try and dive into that kind of first handful of chapters and do a real analysis of kind of what happened and what are the favorite parts. We'll analyze some of the cool characters who have already been introduced and just kind of take it from there as we work our way through the rest of Gardens of the Moon. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. As always, thank you so much for stopping by to check out the channel, to watch the video. If you left a comment, thank you so much for getting that conversation going. If you like the content, make sure to subscribe and click that notification bell so that you never miss a video. Make sure to give us a thumbs up too, and hopefully the YouTube gods will promote this video out there and we'll get more potential readers in here to kind of join that conversation, because that's kind of why I'm in this for the first place. And so again, we'll be tackling that first handful of chapters next week, and until then, happy reading.